The court is now in session. This morning we will continue to hear the testimony of Mr. Scanberg via video link from the United States. Ms. Sakalwati, could you report the attendance of the parties and individuals to today's proceeding? As well as other issues that need to be raised if you have any. Sakalwati, Mr. President, for today's proceeding, all parties to the case are present. As for Noon Chia, he is present in the holding cell downstairs, which is equipped with audio-visual linked, and it is based on the decision by the trial chamber due to his health. Today, the chamber will continue to hear the testimony of the witness, Sidney Scanberg, via video link, and he is ready. And for this afternoon session, we will continue to hear the testimony of the expert, Chim Sotira. We also have a reserve witness, TCW 665. This reserve witness confirms to his best knowledge and ability he has no relationship by blood or by law to any of the two accused or any of the civil parties in this case, and he already took an oath on the 5th. Thank you. President, thank you. I notice the counsel for Noon Chia is on his feet. You may proceed. Sonaron. During the hearing of the testimony of the witness Sidney Scanberg, my client Noon Chia would like to make a statement regarding the evacuation plan for Phnom Penh people on the 17th of April. And he would like to make this statement during any time of the period of the testimony of Mr. Scanberg. President, thank you for your information. Good evening, Mr. Sidney Scanberg.
Good evening, Your Honor.
Mr. Scanberg, during the testimony yesterday, did you face any difficulty or any issues at your end?
No, I think I learned the procedure very well, and I feel comfortable.
Thank you. Once again, we would like to give the floor to the prosecution and then to the lead co-lawyers to put the questions to Mr. Sidney Scanberg. You will have one session for this morning's proceeding, and based on the information that we received, there are difficulties in locating the quotes in the questions put the witness. For that reason, you should clearly specify the documents that you refer to so that the witness can locate the portion that you referred in your questions. And you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, Your Honours. Good morning, Counsel, and a very good morning or good evening to you, Mr. Scanberg, and thank you for returning to answer the questions and assist the court in this matter. Just by way of a general roadmap, I'm going to ask you more questions this morning about the evacuation of the city, the events you describe in your diary with respect to the searches for Khmer Republic officials. Then we will move on to the events that you observed while staying in the French embassy, and lastly, your trip out of Phnom Penh towards Thailand. And before I start with those topics, I just want to ask you a couple of questions about the diary, which, in fairness, I should have started with yesterday. The diary covers the period from January the 4th to May the 3rd of 1975, and it, of course, is a day-by-day account. Can I ask you first, when was this information recorded by you?
My editors asked me early on in that year to keep a diary, and I didn't write the diary until after I came out of Cambodia, after we were released and came into Bangkok and to Thailand, and it has never been published because the stories that I wrote immediately after my freedom covered most of the same ground. So it was not necessary to be published, but I kept the text.
Did you take any notes during the period that the diary covers?
Yes. I mean, my notebooks are filled with lots of things that didn't get in the newspaper because it wasn't necessary. But I thought in a diary it would be useful.
And did you use those notes in preparing the diary?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And just one more question on your work. The information that we have in documents before the court indicates that you were awarded a Pulitzer Prize in 1976. Can you tell the court very briefly what that prize was awarded for?
It was awarded for foreign reporting at great risk, and I accepted it on behalf of my assistant and brother Dithpran, as well as for myself, because without him I would never have been able to do the work that I did.
So when you say for work done at great risk, does that relate to your work in Cambodia or elsewhere?
It was a reference to the fact that I stayed behind and did not join when the embassy, American embassy, left on, I think it was April 12th. I didn't go with the rest of the reporters, American reporters.
Thank you.
I chose to stay, and Dithpran chose to stay, and we sent his family out in the evacuation, and his family is still is flourishing now in America.
Thank you. Thank you for those answers. I'm going to move on now to the topics that I outlined earlier. So returning to the images of the evacuation which you depict in your diary, a few additional aspects of the event I would like to turn to now. You describe at several points in the diary looting of shops, and just by way of an example, and for everyone's benefit, I will read one representative quote and then ask you to expand for us. This is in the diary, document number E236/1/4/3.1 at page 63, which is English ERN 008988271, and that will be towards the bottom of the page, Mr. Schamberg. Only a single sentence. Quote, as the city turned into a ghostly shell, the insurgents took to claiming their spoils, looting shops and setting fires. Can I ask you how many times you observed this and where did you see it?
I only saw the outcomes. I saw the Khmer Rouge soldiers coming back from the center of town with soft drinks and other things from shops that they had broken into. And there were people in the embassy, officials, who were allowed to go into the city, but we were not. And so people would come back and tell us what they saw. And so that's a reference that I did not personally witness myself, but obviously was taking place.
Thank you.
When we were captured at the beginning of their arrival, they took my typewriter and my watch and a radio that I carried, and I did not protest because I was going to be allowed to live.
Okay, and just while we're dealing with that particular moment in time, while you were held, at pages 68 to 69, you describe something that you saw, and it relates to, again, the issue of people's possessions or being taken away. Again, this is the diary, and page numbers 68 to 69, the ERN in English 00898 to 277. Quote, we watch jubilant soldiers passing by with truckloads of looted cloth, wine, liquor, cigarettes and soft drinks. They scatter some of the booty to soldiers at the bridge. We also watch civilian refugees leaving the city in a steady stream. The soldiers take watches and radios from them. So just on that last point, was that something you observed, soldiers taking watches and radios from the refugees?
Right. Well, those are things I actually saw on that first day, and they were celebrating. They were doing things to. They would come close to us and hold out a soft drink, and then pull it back. It was a very hot day, and then they would laugh at us. And I can understand that kind of. The war was over, and they had won. And so they were celebrating. So that looting, and I didn't see any fires. And there were times when we were inside, when we could hear things going on outside, and you could hear one of the soldiers, the Khmer Rouge soldiers, get into a car and try to ride it, and he had never driven a car before. Apparently, we found out later from one of the other guards. And so he was trying to start it up, and he couldn't get it started, and he got it somehow. He got it moving, and it bashed into one of the walls around the French embassy.
Thank you.
So they were,
I apologise for interrupting you there. Just we have limited time, and I want to get back to a lot of additional facts that hopefully you can assist us with. Again, since we're discussing this particular moment in time while you were being held and what you were able to observe then, if I can follow up in relation to one of your answers yesterday, you described how Dith Pran got onto a motorcycle with a Khmer Rouge soldier or officer and went away for 20 to 30 minutes, and then upon his return, you were released. Do you know anything about where he went and what happened there?
he went to the information ministry where they were setting up a temporary, the Khmer Rouge was setting up a temporary headquarters. And it's a place that when they released us, we went to see what was going on. And what he did, he couldn't tell us right away, but when we got out, they released us. He told us what he did. He told us he just questioned the general that was there to explain what if reporters could do their work. And he said he heard that they were able to do their work because someone was on the radio, a Khmer Rouge official, in the morning, and said that the press could operate. And so he came back with the officer and told the officers, his senior officers, that we were legal and we were not to be killed. And so we were released.
Thank you. It's very useful. Thank you very much. And now, returning to the evacuation and the circumstances of the evacuation, you discuss in your diary at pages 76 and 79 your discussions with officials working for the Red Cross in the United Nations. I'm going to read those passages before I ask you a couple of questions. The first passage is at page 76, English ERN 00898-284. This is a conversation with a Red Cross doctor. Quote, "They haven't got a humanitarian thought in their heads," says Murray Carmichael, a doctor on the Red Cross surgical team, who describes the emptying of one of the hospitals yesterday. "They threw everyone out, even paralytics, critical cases, people on plasma. Many will die. It was just horrible." The insurgents had forced Carmichael to abandon a patient in mid-operation at the Red Cross surgery in the Hotel Le Phnom. Can I stop there first? Are you conveying there a conversation that you had with this doctor personally?
Yes, it was a personal conversation, yes.
Thank you, and I'll just move on to the next quote before I ask you additional questions. At page 79, English ERN 00898-287, you spoke, or you describe here, a statement made by a United Nations representative. Quote, "Fernand Scheller, the chief United Nations representative here, is in a frustrated mood. Quote, they are like people from another planet," he says. "Their thinking is completely foreign to ours. I told them that I'm at their disposal if they wish us to help. I said I had 42 experts waiting in Bangkok to come back and help. You know what they did? They laughed. They don't want our kind of help. I would help them if I could, but there's no way." Again, can I ask you first, was that a conversation you had with this gentleman?
That was a conversation I had. Those are my notes.
Thank you. And as far as you are aware, from everything you observed, people you spoke to, and what you heard, were humanitarian agencies such as the Red Cross or the United Nations able to provide humanitarian assistance to evacuees at any time following the start of the evacuation?
No, they were prevented from taking any role in medical help or any other kind of help.
Thank you. These conversations took part during your stay at the embassy, of course, on the 18th of April. Around that time, you also describe, a little bit later in time, but also while at the French embassy, you describe some of the radio broadcasts you were able to hear. This takes us to page 104 of the diary, English ERN 00898-312. It's a 4 p.m. entry, and you say the following, quote, Phnom Penh Radio announcing the results of the Special National Congress just held in the capital said the Congress expressed the country's determination to struggle resolutely against any foreign interference in Cambodia's internal affairs, whether it is military, political, economic, social, diplomatic, or whether it takes on a so-called humanitarian form. Was that a broadcast that you listened to, or was it translated for you, perhaps by someone who spoke Khmer?
I don't remember actually listening to it, and I don't know enough Khmer to be that detailed. So I'm going to have to say that I was told. I know I must have been told by somebody else.
Thank you. In the passage we looked at earlier, there was a description of doctors being forced to leave Hotel Le Phnom. I want to look at a couple of other places that were apparently evacuated and that you describe in the diary again. So just starting at page 50 first of the diary. I apologize. This is page 82, in fact. Page 82 of the diary. English ERN 00898-290. It's a 19th of April entry, and it's at 6 p.m. You say the following, quote, the staff of Calmette Hospital, forced out by the insurgents, begins arriving at the embassy in a caravan of about a dozen full-loaded cars, some of them packed with medicine. In the next paragraph, a nurse from the hospital says the insurgents ordered nearly all the patients out over the last 2 days. Those who could not walk, she said, were pushed up the streets on beds. She said, however, that the staff left behind some gravely wounded and newly operated persons who could not be moved, in the hope that Khmer Rouge doctors would come and care for them. But we never saw any Khmer Rouge medical teams, only soldiers. Among those left behind were 5 badly malnourished infants. So if I understand that passage correctly, on the information you received, it appears to have taken a little bit longer to empty or evacuate the Calmette Hospital. This is an entry of the 19th of April. Would that be right?
Yes, that was correct. That that hospital staff kept working. This was, I believe, a French government hospital, Calmet, and so they very close. The building was very close to the embassy, and so they told us that they knew they could, if they were thrown out of the hospital, that they could come into the embassy. And that's what they did with this caravan of cars with supplies and medicine and so forth, and told us that they were operating on people with guns, with Khmer Rouge guns pointing at them, and it had been very stressful.
Thank you. And just one other example. This is at page 101. It's a 26th April entry. English ERN 00898-309. At 10:15 a.m., you say the following, quote, Spots Leopard, the Save the Children Fund representative, finally comes to stay in the embassy after 9 days of holding out at his headquarters, caring for the abandoned children there. Like others, he was evicted by the Khmer Rouge, but apparently without force. Spots says the Khmer Rouge didn't even realise there was anyone in the clinic until a baby cried loudly a few days after the takeover of the city and attracted the attention of soldiers outside. Since then, the Khmer Rouge had been urging him to leave and come to the embassy, and today made it official. They told him the children would be put in a school, which he did not believe, and that his Cambodian nurses would be sent to the countryside like the rest of the population, which he did. And I'll stop there. First, again, is that a conversation that you had personally with this gentleman?
It's a personal conversation.
Was he able to describe for you whether there were any provisions being made for these children and nurses that he was leaving behind?
No, I think my memory tells me that he was very worried about what was going to happen to them, because they were had been working for a foreign organization.
Thank you. Now moving on to another area that I outlined earlier, and this relates to what you observed and the information you gathered about the apparent searches for Khmer Republic officials and soldiers. For context, if I can start first with what you describe as a mood, as a changing mood in the city. This is at page 65 of the diary, English ERN 00898-273. And in this part, you first describe how Alan Rockoff said he had seen troops in a southern section marching over 100 government soldiers as prisoners. And then a little bit further down you say the following, quote, the mood of the city can now be seen changing. Government soldiers who had been embracing their conquerors a few hours before are now shedding their uniforms in fear all over town. Can I ask you to tell the court how you concluded that people were shedding their uniforms in fear?
This information came from French embassy officials who were allowed to make excursions into the city to to find something in their homes that they wanted to take with them, and so forth. And they would come back and tell us what they saw. So those were comments made or descriptions given to me by some of those officers, embassy officers.
Thank you. You testified yesterday in relation to some of the senior officials of the Khmer Republic that the Khmer Rouge had made announcements to the effect that they had been executed or killed. Could you tell us which particular Khmer Republic officials you recall being mentioned?
Well, I don't know when each of these men were killed. All I was reporting was what those embassy officials, French embassy officials, told us had happened. And all I remember was that it was Long Barrett was executed, and I'm trying to think of, well, we know that Sirik Matak was executed, and I don't know when or if the other 5 names on the list to be killed when they were killed, but I'm guessing that's all it is. It's a guess. They were done away with very quickly.
Thank you. At page 67 of the diary, English ERN 00898-275, there are a number of bullet points, and the one that relates to the time of 3 p.m. Contains the following. And I should say, in fairness, that I believe you are conveying information there that you received from others, but we can verify that. Quote, "In the afternoon, around 3 p.m., while I was preoccupied elsewhere, having been arrested, Khmer Rouge troops brandishing rockets and other weapons forced their way into the neutral zone, the Hotel Lupnom. Their main mission seems to be a search for government military officers." And then you describe how nurses hid an individual who was a Khmer Republic soldier. But if I can simply ask you how you received that information, who did you receive it from?
There were people, foreigners like myself, coming out of the hotel, and we asked him what had happened. Well, why was he leaving the hotel? And why were they leaving the hotel? And they told us that they had been given a half hour to get out and go to the French embassy. And I said, when was that? I asked a particular Scandinavian official, and he said that was 25 minutes ago. So I rushed upstairs and got a bunch of clothes and some food, canned food that I had, and took off up the road to go to the French embassy.
And just in relation to this observation that the main mission of the soldiers who had entered at around 3 p.m. was to search for government military officers, was that something you were told by people who were there?
Yes, who were there and coming out then, and some of them told it to us later. I did not see the searching. I simply had to get my own stuff together and get out quickly.
Very well, thank you. I'm going to move on now to the events in the French embassy, which we've already touched upon. Of course, yesterday you described for us the surrender of Sirik Matak, which took place on the 20th of April. In that same period, you also describe the arrangements being made to remove from the embassy all of the remaining Cambodians. And you describe, starting at page 108, first the surrender of identification documents for everybody who remained in the compound, apart from Sirik Matak and the group that had been surrendered. And then you move on to describe how babies were handed over to expat families and how marriages were arranged between Cambodian women and foreigners in order to enable these women to stay at the embassy. I'm summarizing information in about 3 or 4 pages in the interest of time. Can I ask you to describe for the court what you saw in relation to these events?
Mr. Dirac, the lead official in the embassy, was using his powers to conduct marriages that you just described and helping people who would normally not be allowed to go out, to let them get out. And when the Khmer Rouge found out that he had been doing that, and I don't know how they found out, except maybe they were monitoring his radio contacts with the French embassy in Bangkok, but the Khmer Rouge told him he had to stop that. And so he presided over some marriages in order to get Cambodians out, and then had to stop because he was told that if he didn't stop, this is what he said, that the officers, that his staff would be punished. And but he was both very brave and very helpful as far as he could be.
Can you describe what you saw and observed in terms of the condition of these families as they were being apparently forced to leave?
Well, one family was the husband had been a senior person at the telegraph office. And I got to know him. He was educated in the United States. And he and his wife, she had just birthed their first baby. Just during all of this excitement and war and killing. And he came to me and asked if I would make a deposit. He made a document giving me control over a bank account in the United States. And then, on the day that he and his wife and lots of other Cambodians were being herded out of the embassy, I was in the center of it and saw the man and his wife and the baby. And she asked me to take the baby and look after him because I was going to be able to get out. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, I don't really know that I'm going to get out and what will happen if they do take us out. And so I said I'd be reluctant to do that because it's more than, maybe I can't fulfill it. And at that point, a French woman who had been listening said, I'll take him, and I know all these people in relief organizations, and I will see that he finds a family. And the wife, weeping through all of this, turned over the baby to that woman, and And she did, she did come through. She found him a family, and I turned over that money to the youngster when he was somewhere around 10 years old.
Thank you for that account. Once the hundreds of people had left, and this is at pages 87 to 88 of the book, starting at English ERN 00898-295 and the following page, you describe the entry of Khmer Rouge soldiers into the compound, and I'll read it for you. Quote, "A few minutes later, 3 Khmer Rouge officers in black with pistols and notebooks, guarded by 2 riflemen, came into the embassy. The consul, Dirac, acts as their guide. They walk here and there with blank, unsmiling faces, looking at people closely, asking questions, making notes, and discussing things among themselves. A few Cambodians suddenly come out of the woodwork, one is a Calmet hospital aide, and walk up to the Khmer Rouge officers to try to plead that special circumstances warrant their stay in the embassy. Their appeals are ignored by the communists, and they are pushed out of the embassy gate by French officials." Is that something that you observed personally, these officers coming in apparently to search for any remaining Cambodians?
Yes, that's what I saw.
Thank you. In the book, The Killing Fields, E243.2, this is a document we looked at yesterday, at pages 70 to 71, there is a photograph, and I want to show it to you, see if that is a depiction of the scenes at the French embassy. Mr. President, with your permission, we will display this on the screen. The relevant ERN is 00862-602.
The President, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I should say, Mr. Schamberg, the photograph is attributed to Al Rockoff, and if you can take a look at it and tell us whether that is a place that you can recognize.
The copy of this that I have is very dark. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to look at the screen now. No, it doesn't ring any bells for me.
Very well, we will move on.
What was the caption under the...
I propose to simply move on in the interest of time. There's no caption. It appears on pages that deal with the French embassy, but we will move on. I'm going to ask you now a few more questions about your journey to Thailand. You touched on this yesterday. And can I ask you first, to describe for the court, if you recall, how a number of Cambodians were able to be smuggled onto the trucks, the first convoy that you left with on the morning of the 30th of April.
What is the question?
It relates to the boarding of the trucks on the morning of the 30th of April and the smuggling, for want of a better word, of 3, I believe, Cambodian women in that process who were able to leave with the rest of you in that first convoy?
Well, I'm trying to think of his first name. It was Bizot. He was what was his first name?
That's fine, Mr. Schamberg. Bizot will suffice. You can just give us the account.
He was looking after the loading of our truck. It was 5 in the morning. It was dark, and he helped people come up on the side of the truck and get into it, even though their names were not on the manifest. And then he would count, and the military soldiers, the communist soldiers, saw this, and they said, well, that's too many, and they made them pull off everybody from the truck and start over again. And this time they did it more skillfully, and we had 3 or 4 people in our truck who were getting out without permission. One was an American pilot who was an alcoholic, and there were 2 Cambodian women, one of whom was apparently married to this man. And there was also a woman and her daughter from one of the Russian colonies, and I think that she was on the list.
Thank you.
And so I don't know if Bizot did that on many trucks or not. But I know that we had stowaways on ours, and we were glad to have them.
Thank you. Now, we have limited time remaining, so if I can ask you to be as brief as you can, we're going to look at the descriptions of what you saw on your way from Phnom Penh towards the Thai border.
You want me to describe some of the
I'll take you to specific passages.
Okay.
First, at page 109, English ERN 00898317, you describe travelling down, or I guess south, on the Monivong Boulevard. You say the following, quote, "As we head down Phnom Penh's main thoroughfare, Monivong Boulevard, the city is an eerie sight. The street lights are on, casting their rays on spectral emptiness. Pieces of paper swirl around an occasional abandoned car. A shutter blows in the breeze. A dog trots across the road. A rat scurries through the gutter. But there are no people, no civilians, only Khmer Rouge soldiers. Some camp on the sidewalk, others in the shops, all of which have been broken into and looted, their bent steel gates hanging askew." We talked about looting earlier. Is this image that you describe here of shops having been looted, is that something that you were able to observe while travelling along Monivong?
Yes, it was clear that they had been looted, and it was a ghost town, city, I guess.
Thank you. Now, moving on to the next part of your journey. This is at pages 114 to 115, English ERN 00898322. You are, at this point, you have arrived near a village called Lvia in the Kampong Chnan province, and you were able to see some people and you say the following, quote, several people in the convoy speak Khmer, so are able to talk to the residents. Quote, the Vietnamese took 25 years to liberate their country. We took only 5, one Khmer Rouge soldier living in the village said proudly. Another soldier says that officers of the old regime above the rank of captain will have to spend 3 years in the rice fields being, quote, processed, end of quote. Was that a conversation that you heard or witnessed personally with a soldier discussing what was to happen with officers of the old regime?
It was told to me by other people in the convoy when we would make a stop and they would meet someone and speak in Khmer with them. And this was sort of several people came back and told us these stories.
Thank you. Immediately below that, you describe the refugees coming out of Kampong Chhnang town. You say the following, quote, some refugees, people pushed out of Kampong Chhnang town, are camping on the edge of the village. One of them, a disheartened doctor named Dam Chan, tells me that Kampong Chhnang fell to the Khmer Rouge on April 18, a day after Phnom Penh, and was emptied of people on the night of April 23rd. He said that the hospitals were emptied of patients too, as in Phnom Penh. We were given no time to pack, the doctor says. I simply grabbed my 3 children and my wife and mother, and we ran. I have only what you see on my back. The doctor also says the Khmer Rouge seem to be harassing hospital personnel in particular, never letting us stop to rest, always chasing us on, and we don't even know where we're going. Suddenly, a Khmer Rouge officer who had been watching us strode up and started questioning the doctor. The doctor's face turned frightened, his eyes dropped to the ground, and he hurried off into the woods where his family was. The officer then turned to me, staring at my notebook, and in French asked what I had been talking to the doctor about. Can I ask you, how large was this group that you saw when you spoke to the doctor? And were they all from Kampong Chhnang town?
My memory tells me that it wasn't a huge group. And the doctor came out sort of the woods and to talk to us. And he wanted to tell his condition, what condition he was in, and he and his family and others. And so that's what he did. And I took the notes on that, and that's what he said.
Thank you. In the following sentence, you say that you played dumb, and he finally gave up and asked you for a cigarette. Can you tell the court why it was that you played dumb, speaking to the officer?
Because I thought that if he felt that I was going to use this conversation for a purpose that the Khmer Rouge would oppose, that he might do something to me. So I played dumb, meaning like I'm just a guy here, and and I'm from Canada, and that's why I played dumb.
Thank you. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to just refer to the other towns and cities that you saw and ask you to confirm whether these are images that you saw yourself. First, Kampong Chhnang City, then Punlei and Krakow, 2 more evacuated towns, and then Persat, also evacuated. Did you go through all of these cities or past all of these cities, and did you see them to have been emptied of people?
Yes, I saw them personally, as did everybody else in the convoy.
You also describe or refer to Battambang and Poipet. Did you also go through or past those 2 cities, and were you able to observe their condition?
Yes, and occasionally we would see a cow or some animal in a field and no people as we went through these towns.
Thank you. When you were going through Persat, this is at page 120, English ERN 00898-328, at 1:40 p.m., you say the following, quote, "In Persat, the scene is a repeat of all the other towns. No civilians, only soldiers. All the houses looted, in this case smashed up a bit with kapok, a local product broken open and strewn everywhere. Half-finished meals sit on the tables in some houses. People obviously had to leave in a hurry." Again, for the record, are these images that you yourself observed while going through Persat?
Yes, we sometimes were allowed to get off the trucks and stretch our legs, and that's what I would do when I was stretching my legs.
And perhaps this might be my last question. As you were going along the roads and you saw the emptied towns, to the extent that you were able to look around, did you see where the populations of these cities had gone? Were they able to stay near the cities? Were they able to stay near the roads? Were you able to see any of them?
No. We had no way of. There was no indications of where they had been taken.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for your patience. I realize you're answering these questions late at night. I want to thank you on behalf of the Office of the Co-Prosecutors for your patience in your efforts and for making yourself available to the court. Your Honours, that concludes our questioning, and Mr. President, with your leave, we will hand the floor over to civil party lawyers. Thank you, Mr. Schamberg.
President, thank you. The floor is now given to the lead co-lawyers for civil parties. You may proceed. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honours. I and Ms. Christine Martino will put questions to this witness. We only have a few questions for him. Good evening, Mr. Witness. I have some questions for you. After the Americans stopped bombing Cambodia, either in June or July in 1973, as you stated, did any American soldiers participate with the Lono soldiers in the fight against the Khmer Rouge soldiers? Did you have any knowledge of this event?
As far as I could tell, they would give advice to the leaders of Cambodian units, suggestions as to how to proceed, but they didn't take any physical part in the fighting outside of the bombing, American bombing.
When you refer to they, whom are you referring to?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Just stated that they gave instructions for their attack. When you use the word they, whom are you referring to?
I'm referring to military men in the embassy, in the American embassy, who discussed with Cambodian military leaders suggestions for how to proceed. That's all I know. And I was never present to listen to any of that, but that's what I am told by others that they were doing. And that's, I guess, all I know about it.
ដូច្នេះខ្ញុំប្រាប់លោកបានត្រឹមតែប៉ុណ្ណេះទេតើយោបល់នេះមានបានលេចចេញមកខាងក្រៅ
Did they advise
ចង់និយាយថានៅក្នុងស្ទប់មេដឹកនាំត្រូវបានលេចចេញជាសាធារណៈ
Did the advice that they gave leaked out to the public or was published in any of the newspapers back then?
No.
ចម្លើយអត់ទេ
There was one occasion
បាទនេះនឹងជាសំណួរចុងក្រោយរបស់ខ្ញុំហើយបន្តមក
Thank you, and this is my last questions, and after I would like to hand the floor to my colleague. After the bombing ceased in June or July 1973,
តើមានបរិយាកាសដែលមានបរិយាកាស
was there any concern that the bombing would be restarted?
No, not that I know of, because the Congress, the government in Washington was opposed to giving a great deal more of aid to the Cambodian side, believing that it was clear that they were being slowly defeated by the Khmer Rouge.
And thank you, Mr. President. I now conclude my question, and I'd like to hand the floor to my colleague. President, yes, you may proceed.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning to the bench. And hello, Mr. Schanberg. I can't see you on my screen, but I know you're there. The prosecutor asked you a great many questions, and I want to come back to one or two issues, but I'll begin with a question that could be very useful for us. In 1970, you went to Cambodia, and then we understand that you came back after that. Indeed, your diary testifies to this from January to May 1975. But between those two periods, 1970 and 1975, did you also go to Cambodia and stay for any length of time?
Yes, several times, and for long periods of time.
When you came to Cambodia on those occasions, and that final stint, January to May 75, you were coming for the New York Times, and on those trips, did you have any information about what was happening in the country? What the government was doing on the one hand, but also what was going on in the rest of the country, and news about the gradual advancement of the Khmer Rouge, who over the years had liberated a good part of the country.
Well, there was several places where we got information from. The American embassy would sometimes answer questions about the advances of the Khmer Rouge. The Cambodian generals were sometimes open to interviews and would tell us that their losses were heavy or so forth and so on. So it became very clear that slowly the country was shrinking. And as a company run by the Lon Nol government was shrinking really to Phnom Penh, and all of the cities, rural people had come in and started living in those cities, and some of them were seized by the Khmer Rouge and used as soldiers. But there was information, because we, for a long time, or a reasonable time, we were able to travel, not everywhere, but we could go far enough to find out from local people what the Khmer Rouge was doing and how far they had advanced. So it wasn't like at the very end.
Vous nous dites que vous avez pu circuler pendant un moment.
You're telling us here that you were able to move relatively freely. I was going to ask you about this. Where were you able to go during those pre-1975 visits? And what was your perception of what was going on in the liberated zones?
Les informations que vous avez.
It was clear that the Khmer Rouge were making headway, that they had, for example, taken over Siem Reap, and apparently having done some damage to the buildings, how should I put it? Government buildings built in the 12th century that tourists would go to in earlier years and visit. And people would tell you in places that the Khmer Rouge that had not yet taken over, they would tell us that the neighboring town had been taken over, and many of the people had come into their village. So there was information to be gained if you were willing to take quick visits by automobile to go to those places, which I did.
So you gathered a certain amount of information in this way, but were you also able to pick up facts from refugees who had fled from the liberated zones and who were coming into Phnom Penh?
Yes, the answer is yes, because there were many refugees, and lots of refugee camps in and around Phnom Penh. So there were a lot of people to talk to, and it was clear that slowly but surely the Khmer Rouge were taking more towns and villages, not the cities yet, and it was not there wasn't any optimism that I could find that the Cambodian government was going to be able to turn this around. Even with the American bombing that ended in 1973, Congress ended it. No more money for the bombing. The American Congress.
There is one thing that surprises me in your diary, that you also mention in a number of your articles as well, which is that the Cambodians and the foreigners who was in Phnom Penh thought that the Lon Nol regime was going to fall, and no doubt many of them hoped it would. And they thought that communism wouldn't be such a bad thing. Now, apart from the fact that the Khmer Rouge were advancing, did you have any information about what life was like in these liberated zones? Because there appears to be some kind of contradiction here between all of these people who are running away from the liberated zones and, on the other hand, this kind of optimism, which does appear to have existed as well.
Well, I don't know what optimism you're talking about. I mean, I didn't hear anybody that, I can't remember anybody saying that communism was a good idea, unless it was somebody that was in a communist embassy. And I didn't know anybody like that. I think that most of the military and civilian diplomats that were there were really becoming resigned to the likelihood that the Khmer Rouge were going to win. And the Cambodian people are sometimes not aggressive. They just wanted the
Je vous posais cette question. Pardon.
Time is short, and so I won't quote the passage where you say that even under communism things might have worked in some way. But let me come back to this issue of whether you had precise information about the way in which daily life was organized by the Khmer Rouge in the liberated zones.
I don't think we heard reports. Somebody would escape and come into Phnom Penh. We heard reports of what happened in some of these places in which people were taken prisoner and made to work in the fields and weren't fed very well, and there was lots of disease and death and malnutrition, and there was malnutrition in places that were still protected by the government of Lon Nol, the Cambodian government, and it was a very, very negative scene. Unless you were rooting for the Khmer Rouge.
I'd like to turn to something else now. It would appear that the information you had at your disposal was fairly general, and that, no doubt, it was difficult to acquire hard facts in a situation where it was impossible for you and your colleagues to go into the liberated zones. So let's return to Phnom Penh. A moment ago, the prosecutor was talking to you about the Le Phnom hotel where you were staying. So can you tell us a little bit about the organization of the infirmary or hospital or whatever you wish to call it at that place? What kind of capacity did it have? And when you returned from that rather harrowing day, I believe you found the hospital had been more or less destroyed. Could you tell us about that, please?
What day are you speaking about? I'm confused.
Pardon.
I apologize. I'm talking about the 17th of April, when you came back to the hotel, Le Phnom, and I believe that it was on the 17th of April that you realized that the hotel had to be evacuated. Now, within that hotel, it would appear that there was a kind of infirmary that had been set up, a sort of field hospital, you might say, and I'm going to ask you if you could give us a little bit more detail of that. How many wounded people were being cared for there, and how, in fact, did all that end up being reduced to nothing? Thank you.
Well, my memory may have failed me, but I didn't know of anything. There were doctors, but I never anything that resembled a hospital or even a branch of a hospital. The Red Cross office had several people, and they stayed in the hotel. But I didn't know very much about their work, and the really most of the victims of the war were placed in much larger hospitals, Prayakat Milia, and the buildings that were turned into had been for sports an Asian competition some years before. Those buildings were turned into a hospital, and that was the main military hospital. And so that I don't know what specifically the Red Cross was doing. I just know there were some medical people who were there. That's all.
Thank you. In your book, rather than the journal, excuse me, the reference is E243.2. And in this book you wrote in parallel with Dit Pran at some points, and he described some of the conditions under the Khmer Rouge, the taxi conditions, the violence and the lies and the ways he was treated and the ways in which his compatriots were treated as well. This is one question which really involves two questions, but tell me, when did you hear about these terms that were used for the deportees, the new people and the 17th of April people? Did you hear this kind of terminology when you were at the embassy, or was it only Dit Pran who told you about this subsequently?
When Pran came out, he talked about this at length and in detail. And there was no way that I went searching for, I used whatever sources I had to try to find out if he was still alive for 4 years, more than 4 years. And so I had no information from him until the miraculous day when I got the news that he was alive. And so he's the one that told me what went on and how he was punished when he stole a tomato that he wasn't supposed to be eating. And how he was beaten up and all kinds of things, and how he hid his real occupation and pretended to simply be a Siklo man, meaning a man who pushed carriages around in Phnom Penh and played dumb. And he succeeded, God bless. And Pran, as I say, he told me everything, and this is not a man who tells lies.
Thank you. When he told you his story, which was full of violence, and as was the case for many of the new people, did he tell you about a kind of separation between the base people and the new people? Did he say that the people deported from Phnom Penh, such as himself, were treated in a different way to the others?
Yes.
Oui.
There were always, he told me stories about people that I had known who were discovered, let's say 2 years in or something, who were discovered having worked for an American company or an American newspaper or something, and they would be executed. And one of my driver was thus executed. Saran. I found out all of this later, after the war. His family was still intact, and so I helped them get out of their rut afterward, and so forth. But there really is, I have seen reports now from people who were former Khmer Rouge who say that they liked their Khmer Rouge life. I have not heard that personally, but but from those who escaped, I heard nothing but but a killing. A slaughterhouse, and I think clearly a genocide. That's my opinion, because all the evidence that I have now, or had very soon after the war ended, says it was a genocide by the definition that genocide has.
I'm very grateful to you, Mr. Schanberg, for having answered our questions. Mr. President, this brings me to a close. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président, juste pour les besoins de...
Just one point about the transcription, Mr. President, says the Defence Counsel. With respect to Mr. Schanberg's experiences, it is important to remember that if we did not allow Mr. Short to qualify what had happened in these terms, then we should also remember that such qualification of things is not required of Mr. Schanberg either. I am remembering what Judge Cartwright told Mr. Short, and I think that same comment that she made at that time applies today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Sidney Schanberg, the Chamber would like to remind you that you are testifying as a witness, so you are not entitled to make an analysis and provide your own conclusion. And that is the regulations of the proceeding before this court. And of course, it is the Chamber who would consider all the facts and the laws before us. And thank you, Mr. Sidney Schanberg. The time is appropriate for a short break. We will take a 20-minute break, and we will return after that. And before we take a break, we would like to inform Noon Chea and his team that upon receiving your request this morning via your counsel, Son Arun, that you would like to make a statement regarding the fact on the evacuation of people from Phnom Penh and other towns, the Chamber will grant Noon Chea the time to make a statement for the second session of this morning. That is, upon the resumption of the session this morning, the floor will be given to you. We will take a short break and return at 20 past 10. The court is now adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ